It's going to be a tough week for the Colts as they travel into Jacksonville, as it tends to be ever since 2014. The Colts have never won in Jacksonville since the 2014 football season, which you go back to last year's Week 17 game. That's wild that cost them a playoff spot still in hindsight. But that's not why we're here to talk about this video. We're here to talk about the rough injury report for the Colts as rookie Alec Pierce and Michael Pittman Jr. appear to be missing this coming game. Pittman hasn't been officially ruled out. Pierce has. Pittman has been ruled out with a quad injury. He was limited on Wednesday, missed Thursday, and it's very unlikely that he practices today on Friday as well. So that puts his status in serious doubt. I would anticipate we don't see a Michael Pittman on Sunday, which if that is the case, well, the next question is, who's Matt Ryan going to be throwing the ball to? The answer out the gate, I think, appears to be Parris Campbell. Parris Campbell played on 71% of Colts snaps last week. He only had 4 targets, though. Michael Pittman Jr., that was 13 targets. Alec Pierce didn't have a great week 1. He had 2 targets, but 0 receptions. What do you make of this Colts pass catchers coming into this week of football, Drew?
Well, with Alec Pierce being ruled out and potentially maybe Michael Pittman, if the case, this is a very, very thin wide receiver room. Besides Parris Campbell, it's Ashton Dulin, Mike Strachan. Then you start looking to anywhere else on the field, the Mo Alley Cox to Jelani Woods, maybe even Nyheim Hines can get more receptions out of a backfield, but it's going to be very difficult because obviously Parris Campbell is going to be the clear-cut number 1 at this point. But other than that, it's just very stretched out and very thin. And it's hard to say who's going to be number 2, number 3 in the wide receiving core. Also, too, you can mention Desmond Patman, who's listed behind Michael Pittman and, Dulin and Strachan. There's really after almost Parris Campbell, it's almost like it goes Parris Campbell, Mo Alley Cox, Nyheim Hines. Yeah. And then you start going into those other names that we talked about.
So if you were in a situation where you had Pittman down, you had Keenan Allen down, Parris Campbell, is this a guy that you can start this week?
If it's for 1 week, I wouldn't mind starting him.
What's the upside of Parris Campbell? What can fantasy owners plan around? What's best case scenario?
I mean, best case scenario is that it's tough to think about, but I think the best case scenario for him is that he gets almost the same target share that Michael Pittman got week 1, those 13 targets and such. And you pray to God that he could do something with those targets.
I would say more likely for me is about anywhere from 7 to 9, 7 to 10 targets, somewhere in that range, I would say is more likely for Parris Campbell.
Yeah.
Just because of the type of wide receiver he is. If Campbell could come down with more than half of those, that would elevate his fantasy day. And of course, you wish for touchdown when you talk about a guy like Parris Campbell. But if he could get you anywhere from 6 to 8 receptions, that might be an okay fill-in. He's going to have to be more relied on because, again, without Pierce in there, Pierce was the third most snaps out of the wide receiver position. It really is Parris Campbell. And then Dulin was the second most in wide receiver targets with 6 in week 1. So Ashton Dulin, if you're in a deep league and you're really that desperate, I mean, might be a guy that you just have to kind of consider picking up and putting in your lineup. 6 targets, that tells me that at least Matty Ice was looking for him. Talk about tight ends. If this reciprocates down to the tight end play, maybe Mo Alley Cox suddenly becomes a more desirable streamer. If you're on the George Kittle bubble as far as what his injury status is going to be Sunday, maybe you look at a guy like Mo Alley Cox as someone who might get a little bit more snaps, might get a little bit more targets with the lack of a big body like Michael Pittman. I think that Matt Ryan, and when we talk about red zone territory, he has to start looking at a guy like Mo Alley Cox, who's built like a basketball player. I'd say that that's something that you should consider if you're the Ryan and the Colts offense. This is a big week for Frank Reich. He can't have a down offensive week because last year, after a down offensive week for Carson Wentz, the Colts were more than happy to move off Wentz. If Reich and this Colts team starts off with another non-victory because they did tie in week 1, I would say that he's automatically on the hot seat. They're going to have to make it work with someone. I think Parris Campbell is probably the first up. Dulin's the next up for targets. And then you start looking at the tight ends with Mo Alley and Granson as well. Anyway, guys, hopefully that you're not in a situation where you're having to pick between scraps as far as Colts wide receivers. But if you are, we want to know about it in the comments section. Leave that below. Leave a like on the video, subscribe to our channel, follow us on social media at Juju Talk Sports, at Real Andrew Hagenbaugh. Stay safe, happy, and healthy, and we'll see you on the next one.